Our devotional this morning will be led by Sister Margaret Rowe of the Sisters of Mercy. The prayer that was written by Sister Joan Chittister. Great God, who has told us, vengeance is mine, save us from ourselves. Save us from the vengeance in our hearts and the acid in our souls. Save us from our desire to hurt as we have been hurt, to punish as we have been punished, to terrorize as we have been terrorized. Give us the strength it takes to listen rather than to judge, to trust rather than to fear, to try again and again to make peace, even when peace eludes us. We ask, O God, for the grace to be our best selves. We ask for the vision to be builders of the human community rather than its destroyers. We ask for the humility as a people to understand the fears and hopes of other peoples. We ask for the love it takes to bequeath to the children of the world to come more than the failures of our own making. We ask for the heart it takes to care for all the peoples of Afghanistan and Iraq, of Palestine and Israel, as well as for ourselves. Give us the depth of soul, O God, to constrain our might, to resist the temptations of power, to refuse to attack the attackable, to understand that vengeance begets violence, and to bring peace, not war, wherever we go. For you, O God, have been merciful to us. For you, O God, have been patient with us. For you, O God, have been gracious to us. And so may we be merciful and patient and gracious and trusting with these others whom you also love. This we ask for Jesus, the one without vengeance in his heart. This we ask forever and ever. Amen.
I also want to thank the people that have come from all sorts of different areas of Vermont, come here and show their support. And I'm here to let you know you have been heard. This is a big issue for the people that I represent. And it has been for quite some time. And I don't want to get into a long debate, so I'm going to make this really quick. I believe in accountability. I believe this president should be impeached. I think we need to at least start the proceedings to get the facts of what he has done or hasn't done, or what we think he's done that's right, and what we think he hasn't done that's right. And we will let Congress decide, but we've got to at least get to that point. And in my opinion, if we don't at least start this action, we are leaving the American people, all of us, an opening for any administration to come through and do whatever they so please. I've always said big on accountability. I think this is the first step toward that accountability. Again, Madam Speaker, thank you for letting this go forward. And folks, thank you for being here and showing your support. Thank you.
The question is, House adopt the resolution? Are you ready for the question? Member from Barrytown.
Madam Speaker, I rise to oppose this resolution very strongly. I wish it had first been referred to a committee, as is normal with controversial resolutions such as this. Had it been, I think we could have had greater citizen participation, could have had input, and more than one side in the drafting of what is before us today. And I think we could have had some improvement, correction in the language of the resolution. Madam Speaker, in the discretion of the chair, the matter has been put before us under Rule 52, and although I disagree with that decision, I respect it. I will forego any right, each member has a right, to move to commit the matter to the committee. I believe that enough members of this body respect the actions of the chair, that such a motion would be due to failure before it began. There's no need to go through that procedure. So we proceed to the merits of this resolution. I think there are a lot of things wrong with it. I believe it confuses the roles of the House and the Senate. It asks Vermont's representative to introduce, and the United States Senators to support a resolution requiring the United States House Judiciary Committee to initiate an impeachment. The United States Senators have no jurisdiction over what the United States House of Representatives Judiciary Committee has to say. The confusion extends much more than that. In the scheme of the Constitution, the House of Representatives is analogous to a grand jury in a criminal proceeding, and the United States Senate is analogous to a petty jury, which actually tries the case and determines guilt or innocence. The House of Representatives action would be essentially the same as an indictment. And this resolution, asking the senators to participate in the initiation of proceedings to impeach the President and Vice President, is as if a pre-selected petty jury were to support or encourage or to cheer on the grand jury so as to ask an indictment and say, let's get on with it so that we can get on with the conviction. Madam Speaker, the functions of the House of Representatives and the Senate were deliberately kept separate by the Founding Fathers. Federalist Paper number 65 dealt with why it was appropriate for the Senate to be the trier of fact in an impeachment proceeding. One paragraph out of that paper sheds light on the issue today. Where else than in the Senate could have been found a tribunal sufficiently dignified or sufficiently independent? What other body would be likely to feel confidence enough in its own situation to preserve, unawed and uninfluenced, the necessary impartiality between an individual accused and the representatives of the people, his accusers? This resolution before us today, by asking the United States Senate to support commencement of impeachment proceedings, compromises the independence of the United States Senate. For that reason alone, it is inappropriate. That is the type of thing that a committee could have removed had the committee processed this resolution. But more importantly than that, the resolution overlooks the fact that grounds are needed for impeachment. There are no grounds cited. There are no grounds cited in the resolution. Rather, there is language that is non-specific about serious questions of constitutionality, statutory legality, and the abuse of the public trust. It further, in a non-specific way, cites the President's conduct in his role as Commander-in-Chief in leading our nation into the military conflict in Iraq. What little specificity is cited in the resolution relates to the Vice President's continued advocacy for American troops remaining in Iraq. Madam Speaker, disagreements with policy, such as disagreeing with the Vice President's advocacy of troops remaining in Iraq, are not grounds for impeachment under any definition that I have ever heard. Yesterday, in our caucus, a member from Burlington, and primary sponsor of this resolution, said that what he was asking for was an investigation. I suggest that what this resolution asks for is more of a fishing expedition. It will not benefit this nation. If there are any lessons to be learned from the Clinton impeachment, and I think there are, it is that impeachment is not to be treated lightly. Impeachment ought to be reserved for the most egregious, the most urgent high crimes and misdemeanors, which are the constitutional grounds for impeachment. It is not about whether or not you support the President. It is not about whether you support the war. It's about the nature of impeachment and what it will do to this great society. A member from Burlington also said to us yesterday that he was concerned about precedent. I am also very concerned about precedent. The precedent that will be set if this resolution passes and actually prompts Congress to initiate impeachment proceedings. In this era of divisiveness, acrimony, and real hatred in our political discourse, the precedent that I fear is that every president from this time forth will have to look forward to impeachment proceedings. I do not think that it is a good idea to follow the Clinton impeachment proceedings with the Bush impeachment proceedings with whoever comes next. We do our nation and our state no favors if we pass this resolution. We are asking our Congress to take months out of its work to become totally distracted by impeachment proceedings.
Member from Middlebury.
Madam Speaker, I first want to state that almost all of my speech, except the very last two paragraphs, is a summary of information that comes from a book by Raoul Berger entitled Impeachment, the Constitutional Problems. This book was written in 1973, and he is considered a great scholar on the issue of impeachment. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution provides, the President and Vice President of all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. At the time of the Revolution, the founders of the land were haunted by the threat to liberty and greed for power. They decided on a president because they were afraid of all the powers that the King of England had. They wanted to ensure that the leaders of the new country President, Vice President, civil officers, and justices could be brought to trial for any high crime and misdemeanors. In the revolution, they were fighting against the king and the government of England, and they wanted to put in place a government that could be efficient and work well. But in the case of treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors, they could be punished and brought down from their position of power. They therefore placed the impeachment process in the Constitution. The framers of the Constitution knew about high crimes and misdemeanors meant. Listed in the book on various pages is a listing of the high crimes and misdemeanors, and the founders knew what they were. They are attempts to subvert fundamental laws and to introduce arbitrary powers, abuse of the official power, neglect of duty, encroachment on or contempt of legislative prerogatives, corruption, selling property for less than it was worth. Crimes against the state on this resolution is entirely within the law and is motivated by high respect for the law and for our sacred institutions. Impeachment is chiefly designed to check the executive abuse and oppression, but not to give Congress unbounded discretion. Due process must be followed by Congress for the protection of individuals against arbitrary action. We're going to get at the issues that subvert fundamental laws and introduce arbitrary powers. Using warrantless searches and tapping of telephones is subverting fundamental laws of the country. There is a long-standing process for getting warrants and for getting them overnight. Telling people of the United States untruths is an abuse of governmental power. For this and other reasons, we believe that the process of impeachment should be started. It is critical for Congress to proceed within the limits of high crimes and misdemeanors, and to have a fair trial of the persons they are dealing with.
The question is, shall pass the adopted resolution. Are you ready for the question? The member from Borough, the member from Montpelier.
Madam Speaker, it is traditional for us, for the sponsors of the resolution, to explain their resolution as well as the intent behind it. And I was sort of waiting for one of them to stand up, but I wonder if I may interrogate the member from Burlington, Representative Zuckerman.
The member from Burlington is interrogated if he so chooses.
Madam Speaker, I wonder if the member could tell me, in a little bit of reference to what was spoken earlier by the member from Erie-Town, with the exception of just two sentences in the resolution, I don't see the movement towards impeachment. I wonder if in the first whereas, if the member could tell me which specifically serious questions of constitutionality, statutory legality, and abuse of public trust are being used as grounds for impeachment of the president.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll give one example. I don't think I should go into a long litany here, but certainly the admitted action of wiretapping U.S. citizens without going through either the public process or the allowed by law secret process is just one of many where the president has gone around the law and abused that power.
Madam Speaker, is that the, let me finish up on that. So is that the only instance of grounds that the member feels is motivation for impeaching the president?
Well, that would certainly apply to the statutory legality portion of the first whereas clause. I believe the representative from Middlebury also discussed other areas with respect to abuse of official power, which fall within the constitutionality section, and abuse of the public trust would fall into that same category with respect to the information that was, I would argue, certainly widely disseminated by the administration with respect to information prior to our invasion of Iraq that, frankly, many people did not think was accurate and ultimately proved not to be accurate. So that alone there would be an abuse of the public trust to basically foment us into a war on fear when, in fact, there were other options.
And specifically, the abuse of public trust in regards to the events that led up to the Iraq War. Can the member tell me specifically what he's referring to?
Well, Madam Speaker, one thing I would certainly reference would be the issue of weapons of mass destruction. And that's an example. Ultimately, I think the majority of work to be done here would be work to be done by Congress through these proceedings. I do not profess to know every single example that occurred, but I would argue that, in fact, our current Congress is starting to do some of these investigations even today. They're not doing it under the auspices of impeachment, but certainly abuses of power are being investigated even today.
Thank you. Thank you, Member. Madam Speaker, the issue of wiretapping is certainly one that was very prominent in the news and was mentioned to us in caucus yesterday. I think it's interesting to note, and the members might be interested to hear, a gentleman by the name of Alan Kornblum is a former FISA court judge. And in fact, he is one of the judges who co-authored the 1978 Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. He was quoted in the Washington Times earlier this year saying that the President was duly authorized under the Constitution to order the wiretapping of suspected terrorists without getting a warrant from the FISA court. His testimony, he testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He said that if a court refuses a FISA application and there is not sufficient time for the President to go to the court of review, the President can, under executive order, act unilaterally, which he is doing now. He testified along with 4 other former FISA court judges. And they suggested it would have been irresponsible if President Bush to have deferred to the FISA court. In a direct quote, he said, "I think the President would be remiss exercising his constitutional authority by giving all of that power over to a statute." The other item that was mentioned by the member from Burlington, the principal sponsor of the resolution, was that about statements of weapons of mass destruction that led up to the Iraq War. I'll read a couple of other quotes that were printed in various congressional testimony as well as media outlets. Without question, we need to disarm Saddam Hussein. He is a brutal, murderous dictator leading an oppressive regime. He presents a particularly grievous threat because he is so consistently prone to miscalculation. And now he is miscalculating America's response to his continued deceit and his consistent grasp for weapons of mass destruction. So the threat of Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction is real. The same person also said he would be voting to give the President of the United States the authority to use force if necessary to disarm Saddam Hussein, because I believe that a deadly arsenal of weapons of mass destruction in his hands is a real and grave threat to our security. Those 2 statements were made by Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts. Another quote, "One way or the other, we are determined to deny Iraq the capacity to develop weapons of mass destruction and the missiles to deliver them." That is our bottom line. Again, if Saddam rejects peace and we have to use force, our purpose is clear. We want to seriously diminish the threat posed by Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program. Those 2 quotes were made by President Bill Clinton in February of 1998. We must stop Saddam from ever again jeopardizing the stability and security of his neighbors with weapons of mass destruction. That was Madeleine Albright in February of 1998. Saddam Hussein has been engaged in the development of weapons of mass destruction technology, which is a threat to countries in the region, and he has made a mockery of the weapons inspection process. That was Representative Nancy Pelosi in December of 1998. We know that he has stored secret supplies of biological and chemical weapons throughout his country. That was stated by Al Gore in September of 2002. Al Gore also said Iraq's search for weapons of mass destruction has proven impossible to deter, and we should assume that it will continue for as long as Saddam is in power.
Vermont. They're in support of HRAT. I rise on their behalf with a very brief statement. Mr. Speaker, this House has the capacity to send a strong message of dissent. In times of absolute crisis, it is important that we each voice dissent at every level that we can. Silence, this implies consent. It is important for constituents and the world to see. If this resolution is voted down, it confirms an unprecedented level of tolerance for corrupt use of power that will only grow larger in coming presidencies. The writers of the Constitution foresaw this day and provided us with the appropriate remedy. We mention it 6 times in 5 sections of the Constitution for a reason, so that we would value it and use it when appropriate. I urge my colleagues to voice their dissent with a strong yes for this resolution. Thank you.
Question is Statehouse about the resolution. Are you ready for the question? Member from Westminster.
Madam Speaker, I find myself feeling trapped. The easy thing for me to do is to vote yes on this resolution, because I do not support this administration. I despise the action of this administration, be it the war or the violations of our rights. But I feel strongly that the means to cure the ills that face us as a nation do not, for me, include pursuing impeachment. I want our Washington leaders working hard and being focused on protecting our rights, protecting our environment, and protecting and educating our children. So I want to change this administration, but do not support the resolution to impeach President Bush or Vice President Cheney. But I do not want anyone to misunderstand my vote as being in any way a vote in support of this administration.
This House will stand in order. When someone is speaking, they have the floor, and our guests are very welcome here, but we cannot interrupt the business of this House. If necessary, the guests will need to leave, which is not the outcome we want. Only the person who has the floor may speak. Member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I agree.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution. I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone. Maybe more surprising is it's only recently that my support has shifted from tepid to wholehearted. There are many in this body, myself included, that do not think our country needs to get bogged down in a long, nasty impeachment trial. That would become a cheap political act, the appearance of purely partisan interest. I suppose we have to thank the political culture in our nation's capital for creating this climate. A climate where we must explain to our young people, to our constituents, that the President and his friends are somehow held to a standard outside of the law as we know it. Very unfortunate. But to me, this is not really the question before us today. The resolution to begin impeachment proceedings is down the hall, comfortably tacked to the wall in the Judiciary Committee. It will surely spend another year. Today's decision isn't about the merits of impeachment. It isn't about us weighing the gravity of the administration's crimes. Today, we have the privilege to do what so many Vermonters wish they could do. Express deep dissatisfaction with the direction of our country. Be it foreign policy, domestic policy, healthcare, education, transportation, jobs, environment, you name it. Madam Speaker, Vermonters are overwhelmingly disgruntled. They have only limited access to communicate their frustration. So they have turned to us, the public voices, if you like. They are here today, as they were at town meetings and on election day, and daily in our newspapers. They are understandably outraged at what is happening in the White House, and they are asking us to have the courage to take a stand. History will not reflect kindly on the Bush administration. And I am grateful that today I have the chance to go on record with my vote in protest to its actions. It will take time. History will be clear in judging President George W. Bush. Are you going to be on record as an opponent? Or will yours be a voice of silent acceptance? Madam Speaker, Vermont can send a strong message to Washington and the rest of the country. We are too afraid to stand up. And who can we hope will have the courage to stare power in the eye and speak defiance? We have an obligation to our state and to history. I'm proud to vote in favor of this resolution, and I urge my colleagues to join me. Thank you.
Question is, shall House adopt the resolution and wait for the questions? Member from Berlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first I'd like to say that I'm at least proud of the fact that we here in the House are having a debate on this issue, as opposed to the room down the hallway, which passed an impeachment resolution of the President and the Vice President of the United States with literally no debate. Madam Speaker, the member that spoke before me from Burlington mentioned history. The history with George would render a verdict very unkind towards President Bush. And I will leave that verdict to history. Whether history judges President Bush and Vice President Cheney unkindly, and it may very well, is not worthy of an article of impeachment. Madam Speaker, we've heard several charges made today here in regards to the war. And impeachment, hating George Bush is not good enough for impeachment. Hating the war is not a good enough reason for impeachment. Madam Speaker, one issue that was mentioned was wiretapping. And may I quote from an article in the Washington Post by Charles Krauthammer? In regards to wiretapping, Madam Speaker, it's written in this article that as John Schmidt, Associate Attorney General in the Clinton administration, wrote, every president since Vice's passage has asserted that he retained inherent power to go beyond the Act's terms. Indeed, President Bill Clinton's own Deputy Attorney General testified to Congress that the President has inherent authority to conduct warrantless physical searches for foreign intelligence purposes. Then noted a few minutes later that courts have made no distinction between electronic surveillances and physical searches. Madam Speaker, last November, in Vermont, we elected Senator Sanders, we elected Senator Leahy, we elected Congressman Peter Welch, and across the country, a new majority was elected. That new majority, Madam Speaker, certainly has much more significant information at their disposal than we do here today in a resolution that has 3 short whereas paragraphs leading into a resolve clause calling for the impeachment of the President and Vice President and installing Secretary, Speaker of the House as President of the United States. Madam Speaker, I believe that we ought to lead in the hands of the new majority that was just elected a few months ago who know much more than we do in this Vermont House here today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question is now asked about the resolution. Member from Northfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I told my constituents earlier this week, if we were voting on a brief resolution, I do not believe this body should be telling our congressional representatives whom we have elected to do that job whether they should support initiation of actual impeachment proceedings.
Question is now asked about the resolution. Member from Thetford.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there should be no doubt that the President and the Vice President will woefully mislead the American people. They have gotten us into a disastrous war about which we are just beginning to admit the consequences. You may have heard that the resolution will send a message, a wrong message to our troops, as we heard when we were debating a previous resolution. While they will undoubtedly hear our message, the resolution will not do that. The resolution is about sending a message to the man in the White House and the Vice President down the street. You may have heard that the resolution will confuse and contradict the fine work of our congressional delegation as they work to hold the administration increasingly accountable and to bring the war to a close. But the resolution will not contradict or confuse them. Quite to the contrary, this resolution is a compliment to those efforts, even as it seems to head down a different fork in the road. I will try to explain, Madam Speaker. Those of us who remember clearly the stateside experience of the war in Vietnam will remember just how tumultuous and divisive a time that was. In the intervening years, we have managed to get some things right that we did rather poorly 35 or 40 years ago. First, we have learned to respect and admire our men and women under arms, the Americans who follow our flag in defense of our country, some of whom, Madam Speaker, are in the chamber today. But it was not the soldiers who failed us then, and it is not the soldiers who fail us now. It is the President and the Vice President who continue to fail and deceive us day after day. The second thing that we learned from the Vietnam era is that it was not one action or one protest that ended the war. It was not the huge anti-war rally in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco or the massive rally on the Washington Mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial. It was not the publishing of the Penn John papers or the work of Congressman Father Diamond. Madam Speaker, it was all of those efforts, all those events together that finally brought about the end of that horrible war. Our debate and vote today is a similar effort. Ending the war in Iraq and restoring common sense to the government is not someone else's job. It is, in part, our job. It is a remarkable truth about democracy in these United States that as Americans, we are all responsible for our government. We, each of us, has the ability to act and set things right. We have heard the debate on this resolution is a distraction, and until a few days ago I thought that might be so. We have heard that we should let Congressman Welch, Senator Leahy, and Sanders do their job. Well, our debate is certainly an interruption from our normal work here, Madam Speaker, but these are not normal times. It is important that we use the means we have available to us to tell the country that we are taking a stand in defense of democracy, honesty, and international decency. By voting yes on this resolution, we will be certainly taking a road less traveled by, but that may make all the difference.
Question is shall have about the resolution. Are you ready for the question? So all those in favor, Member from Hartman?
Speaker, when the vote is taken, I request to be by roll.
Members, after the vote is taken, shall be by roll. Members abstain, members abstain. Question is now House about the resolution. Are you ready for the question? Member Burlington.
Madam Speaker, I want to make one last point on the wiretapping issue. I do think that we all want to be vigilant in regards to our civil rights, civil liberties. Madam Speaker, we all need to keep in mind what we're talking about in regards to wiretapping suspected terrorists, Al-Qaeda, and the attack 9/11, which killed 3,000 innocent people. We haven't had an attack like that on our soil since. Madam Speaker, it is very important. Can you imagine any president of the United States, another attack occurred, and did not do everything in their power to make sure that it did not occur? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question is now House about the resolution. Are you ready for the question? Clerk shall commence to call the roll.
For Brandon, no.
3 minutes.